It's our very great pleasure to welcome our very special guest who has been at the Sydney Institute, I know, a number of times. Ehud Yaari is someone well known to many of you here. You've read his articles either in the Israeli media or, more recently in some of the esteemed global media, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, the New York Times, and including the magazine of the week, the Atlantic Monthly, just to name a few. He is, of course, an award-winning journalist as well as a commentator. He won an award for his work on the peace process between Egypt and Israel, his coverage of the Gulf War, his coverage of the war with Lebanon. He's interviewed just about everybody that should be interviewed in the Middle East that relates to all of the conflict and the politics of that era. He's interviewed, of all people, Yasser Arafat, which I find extraordinary, King Hussein of Jordan, many Israeli prime ministers, including, of course, Yitzhak Rabin and the current Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. So we're in for yet another treat. And on top of all of that, he's written 8 books on the Middle East. So his topic tonight is something that we've all been praying for the day after the end of the Gaza war. Mr. Yaari, you are very welcome here at the Sydney Institute. You are amongst friends, and we are looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much.
As usual, I will be a bit blunt, and I will not beat around the bush, any bush. We have tectonic, I really mean the word, tectonic changes in the Middle East, which have to do with the current war or the recent war between Israel and its adversaries, enemies, but not only with that. And I'll give you an example. The two non-Arab ex-great empires of the region, Turkey and Iran, are now engaged in a ferocious, vicious rivalry all over the region. That's new. It didn't happen before. Let me remind you, those two empires, the Persian Empire, the Ottoman Empire, have learned for the past 250 or more years to manage their competition with a mixture of cooperation and a dose of friendship. No longer. Now, and it's partly because of the war and the way it is ending, now they are in open conflict all over the region. And this is huge, because I've been saying here before, and I will not repeat it, the Arab world, apart from the rich Gulf states, is basically in a process of implosion, different degrees, different forms in different countries. What remains as the main players in the region, those who remain, are the non-Arab players. Iran, Turkey, little Israel. The big question now, so the Iranians and the Turks are now engaged in battles through proxies in Iraq, in Syria, in Lebanon, in the Horn of Africa, Somalia, Sudan, Southern Caucasus, and I can go on, because it spreads to Afghanistan, Pakistan, the rebellion in Balochistan, etc. It's an all-out confrontation, which I don't believe will get to a point of them taking up arms and going to war, but they are pretty confident now to fight through its own proxies. That's a major change. The Turks did not embark, Erdogan, the great Democrat, the Turks did not embark upon an open policy of confronting Iranian attempts to establish their predominance, hegemony in the region, especially the Levant, before they realized that in the current war, Israel has prevailed. It has not improved relations between Turkey and Israel. Turkey is still boycotting any trade with Israel, knowing pretty well that all the trade is now going through Greece and Cyprus, so doesn't matter that much, neither to them nor to us. But it's the way that Israel, if I may say so, has managed to prevail, not yet to end the war, but to prevail, that have encouraged Turkey to take this new posture. Question mark, as an Israeli, I'm extremely interested in it, to what extent we can aspire to have a semi-rapprochement or more with the Turks as long as Erdogan is in power. But it would be a major breakthrough if Turkey, the moderate Arab states led by the Gulfis, and Israel would cooperate in different ways to make sure the Iranians don't bounce back. This is one part of the tectonic shift. And if anybody is interested in watching it, I truly recommend to take a look at what is happening in the South Caucasus, where the Turks and Israel helped Azerbaijan win the war over Nagorno-Karabakh against Armenia. And now the Turks are in the process with our Azeri friends, they are mediating between us and the Turks now, are trying to get something, I will not go into the details, which is called the Zangezur corridor, which will separate Iran from its close friend Armenia. And they are fighting it. And the Azeris and the Turks are not going to give up on that. If you listen to the language, the official rhetoric of Turkish and Iranian officials, it's unprecedented. I'll give you a small example. Turkey has initiated a radio station in Farsi. What a crime. The Iranians officially describe this as an act of war. This is the kind of mutual suspicion that has built up between these two ex-empires. The other tectonic shift is a direct cause of the war. I was saying here last time that we were here with all the protests and everything which are still going on, etc. What is important now for us, Israelis, is to prevail. Once the world realizes that we have managed to prevail, coming out of the massacres of October 7th, things will start to change. And luckily, not thanks to our government, thanks to our hundreds of thousands reservists and a magical Air Force, and other tools, we have managed to prevail. I would like to take you through the picture as I see it. In Gaza, Hamas is broken. The two top echelons of their military command were decapitated. They have only two of their senior commanders still alive. They have no chain of command. They are no longer a cohesive military organization. They have lost their huge arsenal of rockets, ATMs, anti-tank missiles, and they lost 70, 80%, nobody knows exactly how much, of their tunnel, the huge project of the tunneling. There is fierce infighting amongst the remaining Hamas leadership, certainly those outside, Qatar, Istanbul, over succession, over policy, what to do with the hostages, and they cannot reach an agreement. In fact, just to illustrate, the guy who is now calling the shots, to the extent somebody is calling the shots now in Hamas, is the guy who was the main competitor and rival of Yahya Sinwar, the guy who ordered the October 7th attack. His name is Nizar Awadallah. He's not a well-known figure. He's important in Hamas. He is now calling the shots. He has objected to the October 7th attack. He has objected to the close alliance of Hamas with Iran and many other issues. So there is a major change in the organization. Their whole civilian governance system in Gaza, in the Gaza Strip, has been decapitated too, including their, in the past 2-3 weeks, including their prime minister, the guy in charge of the administration, civil administration in the Gaza Strip, and the others. So what you see now in Gaza, people realize where they are, Hamas, that there is a change of tune on their part, with more and more Hamas leaders saying, oh, what a mistake we did on October 7th. Some of them publicly, including the still alive commander of the Gaza Brigade, the biggest brigade of Hamas in Gaza. So people begin to demonstrate and post videos on the social media and speak their mind and say Hamas is responsible for our tragedy. Should be encouraged because it will make things easier in the future. But we are not yet at the day after in Gaza, because we still have, I'll be careful, I believe 25 to 30 hostages alive. We need to get them out. Otherwise, there is no remedy to the Israeli soul. Hamas knows that these hostages are their ultimate insurance policy. So even if they free, we are now talking about 5 to 11 more, they will still keep some as a shield. So we are not yet at the day after, because we have a sort of a ceasefire, formally a ceasefire in Gaza, but the Israeli army keeps going after every Hamas that they can locate, every Hamas activity that pops up, and it will continue. In order to do that, we don't have to be inside the Gaza Strip. We can do everything. The Gaza Strip is a very narrow strip. We can do that all from our territory and from the air. But it has to be accepted and realized by the Gazans and everybody around that we are going to be persistent. What is the aim? The aim is to get Hamas to accept disarmament. Doesn't seem likely now. I would propose that we can get there, hopefully. Offer safe passage to the remaining fighters with arms. Anyway, they are not seeking any more engagement with the Israeli forces for a long time now. And the day after comes after that, because what we have now is a situation in which everybody is willing to help Gaza. Reconstruction of Gaza will take years and dozens of billions of dollars. There are different estimates. The minimal one is 50 billion. Who's going to pay? We need to get to that point where people are willing to send funds and contribute battalions to serve as security police of Gaza. Now, what is the situation? We don't want to control Gaza. Oh yes, we have our loonies who want to settle Gaza again. It's not going to happen. The UAE is willing to send a battalion. Saudi Arabia willing to send a battalion. Egypt willing to send a battalion. Morocco willing to send a battalion, and others. On one condition, that there is no threat that Hamas will shoot at them. And this is why you cannot ignite any process of a day after reconstruction and pacifying Gaza without solving this issue of Hamas. I'll give you an example. The Americans, very thoughtful, serious American general, Fenzel, who's been in the region for several years now, has developed a very serious plan how to maintain security in Gaza the day after. It is based, I'll save you the details unless you are interested, it is based, it was not published, but it is based on the idea of recruiting over a year 10,000 young Gazans whose families are not too closely linked to Hamas as a local security force. Because unlike what ABC here may think, for the Gazans, sending troops, if it was at all possible, from the West Bank to Gaza, they will be perceived as an occupation force, the West Bankers. It's a no-no, and the Americans know it. But how can you start recruiting young Gazans to a local police force, even if it's under the roof of the Palestinian Authority, unless these guys know they are not going to be executed in the street? So we need to keep the pressure. It's not a war. It's a different type, not even a campaign, but persistent pressure. And I believe it will yield results, but not overnight. I'm moving to the other front, Lebanon. Hezbollah, the same. The Hezbollah first, second echelons of the military command decapitated. The guy who is now the chief commander of Hamas, I think, of Hezbollah in Lebanon, nobody ever expected him to be in this job, Abu Ali Haider. And they have, apart from the military defeat, you know all about the pages and the walkie-talkies, and apart from that, they have suffered two major setbacks, and the third is underway. Political setbacks. One, a combined pressure by the United States and Saudi Arabia. The French are trying to be partners too, but nobody in the region really take President Macron very seriously. Not even in Lebanon, in which most people speak also French. They have managed to get the commander of the Lebanese army, General Joseph Aoun, a Maronite Christian, of course, elected as president of Lebanon against the wishes and the prayers of Hezbollah. And they could do nothing to stop it because they have lost most of their political allies on the Lebanese political spectrum. The second defeat, a judge at the ICC in Hague, who was out of Lebanese politics for 2 decades or more, was appointed prime minister with a technocratic government in which Hezbollah is not represented, only offered advice on 2 minor ministries. They have lost control over the government. And both this prime minister, Nawaf Salam is his name, and the president, Aoun, are saying only one weapon in Lebanon, the weapon in the hand of the state, nobody else. Only the state takes a decision about war or peace. And they have embarked, with American Saudi encouragement, upon direct negotiations now with Israel. It begins with, final demarcation of the borderline, but it will go beyond. Because what the Americans are pushing, and the Gulfies, is for a sort of a non-belligerency agreement, short of joining the Abraham Accords or making a peace treaty, non-belligerency. Solve the problems on the border. Hezbollah is not in a position to resist it. The Israeli army, just like in Gaza, keeps going day in, day out. There is a ceasefire. And Hezbollah respects, by the way, the ceasefire. But the Israeli army keeps going after any Hezbollah attempt to re-establish presence, whether it's south of the Litani River or north of the Litani River. And the Lebanese government protests, but not too loud. And pressure will continue. They are unable to get Iranian support. I'll come to Iran in two paragraphs. They are unable to get Iranian support. They are pretty isolated politically within Lebanon now. Let's see where it leads. Part of the reasons, or a very significant reason for why Hezbollah is in such bad shape, is what happened in Syria. People don't really understand what has happened. What has happened is that for the first time in my life, and I'm not a spring chicken as you can tell, there is no Syrian army. Nothing is left. the day Mr. Shara, Jolani, ex-jihadist, still jihadist, ex-Islamist, still Islamist, it's debatable. We can go into that. But the day he strolled into Damascus, unopposed, because the Syrian army, the big Syrian army melted away, was the day that Israel said, 1 minute, nobody is in control of Syria. This guy doesn't have enough people under arms to control Syria, this President Shara now. We are taking precautions. So Israel has taken sort of a security belt along our border in the Golan, and furthermore declared that everything south of Damascus, that's 100 kilometers all the way to the Jordanian border and our border on the Golan, will be kept demilitarized. You go there, you meet the Air Force. So nobody goes there. Nobody goes there. And the IDF took the peak of, if you know, Mount Hermon, the highest mountain in the area, from where, I can tell you because I've been there, from where, with a good binoculars, no more, you can peep through the windows of the presidency palace in Damascus. Yeah. So, on top of that, Israel is cultivating very intensively its relationship, its support with the Druze community of southern Syria. That's 50,000 Druze in 15 or so villages on the slopes of Mount Hermon, very close to our border, and they are asking to be annexed to Israel. It won't happen. And 60, 70 kilometers away, 500,000 Jews on the Druze mountain, Suwaida province, who are now being supplied by Israel. All their leaders came to visit Israel publicly. Israel has declared that anybody who tries to touch the Druze, because we have many Druze in our army in very senior positions, anybody touching the Druze, it's our business. And the government in Damascus, the new government in Damascus, does not protest, you know what, too loud. I think the next step should be that we start a dialogue with the new, we have communications with them, but we need to start a more serious dialogue with the new regime in Damascus, and he's very weak. Remember, he took Damascus, he took Syria with 25,000 people, no more. He cannot control it. I'm getting friends in Damascus explain to me what's happening. They cannot. They don't have the manpower to do that. But we have to talk to them. And we have to, a lot to talk to them and agree on. For example, combining efforts to prevent Iranian and Hezbollah, but mainly Iranian attempts to re-establish themselves as underground in Syria. They are the ones behind the massacres on the coast. Talking about curbing Palestinian armed factions who used to operate out of Syria. Getting an arrangement by which Druze, if not the Syrian state, are allowed to normalize relations with Israel, as well as other communities in the south, non-Druze, Sunnis, who are interested and with whom we have cultivated relations since the outbreak of the Syrian civil war in March 2011 in Daraa, the southernmost province. And Israel can do a lot to solve Syria's main economic problem, which is fuel, electricity, power. What happens now, I'll admit to you that personally, I thought it was a huge mistake, is the Qataris, whose hand is in every pie, have promised the new leader of Syria that they will provide gas to the country because they don't really have electricity. What is the gas that is provided? It's an Israeli gas from our East Med fields provided to Jordan, because we provide Jordan, we provide Egypt. Why should it be a donation of the Qataris? It can be our contribution. And we will find a solution for the funding. It's because the gas goes anyway from the East Med fields through Israel to Jordan to Amman and lights up everything there. We can send more through the pipeline for Syria, and with a minor extension to Lebanon, which has 2 hours of electricity a day. So many issues on which we can, whether we accept that Mr. Shara is no longer a jihadist or not, in which we may be able to build a new relationship with Syria. I hope they listen on our side. I'm not always true. The last point I'll make is about Iran. The Iranians have suffered a defeat. The axis of resistance was broken, not shattered, broken. They have lost their proxies. They have, for the past at least 40 years, they had a policy, a strategy of what they called forward defense. They will defend Iran from Lebanon with Hezbollah, from Syria with the Assad army, etc. That is gone, no longer. On top of that, when they attacked Israel with missiles and were repelled, the response of the Israeli Air Force was to demolish. If I knew a stronger word, I would use it. Demolish Iran's air defenses. Iran is now, at this point that we are talking, is deprived of air defenses. And the Russians are not rushing to help. Watch it. And there is a huge debate going on in Iran. Much of it behind closed doors, but some of it in the very lively Farsi media, which within confines is pleasure to read, and in the Iranian parliament, where the debates are really, again, within the confines, are very interesting. And they just impeached 2 ministers. And the debate going on in Iran is the following. Are we going to stick to the strategy that has failed and send a lot of good money that we don't have? They are basically bankrupt. Are we going to send a lot of good money that we don't have after the bad money that we have lost on Hamas and Hezbollah and Islamic Jihad, etc.? Or are we going to seek a different course of action? Probably a nuclear deal with the United States and the European E3, Germany, UK, France, accepting restrictions stronger than the 2015 JCPOA under nuclear activity. It's a huge debate. As I said, mostly behind closed doors. But what a guy like me can see is that it's undecided yet. We don't see them putting a major effort into resurrecting Hezbollah or Hamas or Islamic Jihad or, Syrian pro-Assad forces in Syria. A little, yes. But they will have to make a decision. Where are they going? Where are they heading? And with a president like Trump, whatever anybody thinks about him, they don't know whether at one point there will be a green light to Israel to attack, which the Israeli Air Force has proven that they can, or even the Americans. See what they do with the Houthis in Yemen now. They moved from what under Biden was called active defense. They switched to an offensive mode. This is the big question mark hanging now over the region. What will be the decision of the Iranians? One last 2 paragraphs on Israel. Israel is undergoing, it's the war, it's the hostages, it's the terrible massacres and mutilation, etc., of October 7th, the intelligence fiasco. If you want, we can go into that. I've been speaking about this before. But in Israel, we have now a major battle. It's like the government of Israel under Mr. Netanyahu against the state of Israel. That's what it is. To many of us, a majority of us. He has turned his party, the Likud, which used to be historically a liberal, right-wing, decent party, under Prime Minister like Begin, who made peace with Egypt, etc. He has turned it into a fan club of himself and his family. He is emptying the civil service of good professionals, appointing loads of what we call votes contractors who can get people elected in the Likud primaries before elections. They are getting appointed to really important companies like defense companies. The people who produce the Iron Dome and the Arrow and now the Laser Dome is coming into action. And many countries are queuing up. I'm sure Australia is not there. He's sacking the head of the security service. He's sacking the Attorney General. In Israel, it's different. It's not like Dreyfus is Justice Minister and Attorney General. No, in Israel, it's separate. There is a Justice Minister. The Attorney General is the independent guardian of the law. Her, in this case, it's a lady. Her role is to tell the government this is legal, this is not. it will all end up, and there are more examples of what's happening, it will all end up at the Supreme Court. But Bibi's people, and he himself, are already saying they will not respect the ruling of the Supreme Court. His justice minister is saying he doesn't recognize the new head of the Supreme Court because it was not his choice. So, where we have these huge opportunities opening up, huge strategic opportunities, we are all immersed, not just with the hostages, of course, but with this struggle to maintain Israel as it was and prevent what I call the urbanization of Israel. That is, a system like Viktor Orban has initiated in Hungary. And this is what the Israeli public is interested in. This is why hundreds of thousands of people take to the streets. And it can turn into a very, very ugly confrontation between the Bibi fans and all the others. I'll conclude by saying that it would be very helpful if the international community could get the Palestinian Authority to get their act together, what the Americans call revitalized Palestinian Authority, so that they are able, because now it's corrupt, dysfunctional, inactive. They tried to impose law and order in a small refugee camp in the northern and West Bank. There are two best battalions. They couldn't do it. The Israeli army had to go in. Because there were armed bands there funded by the Iranians, weapons smuggled from Jordan. If a Palestinian address can be created within reasonable period, that would help get all these other processes I was referring to into motion. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Please explain the significance of the differences between the Sunnis and the Shia in everything you've talked about tonight.
Yeah, there is a tendency to exaggerate the depths of the divide, the rift between Sunnis and Shiites. They have broken, they parted ways back in the 7th century. But people tend to forget that the Iranian revolution, Khomeini, were congratulated and embraced by the Muslim Brotherhood, which is the pan-Arab movement, the major pan-Arab movement of the Sunnis. So there is religious history. There are many centuries of bad blood between Shiites and Sunnis, but not to the point that they cannot cooperate or work together, etc.
Thank you for your speech. It's been excellent. Daniel Pipes once said that there's never an end to a war unless one party realizes they've lost. In that, you've got the major leadership of Hamas sitting in six-star hotels in Qatar and Ankara, who are saying that they're going to fight to the last martyr in Gaza. At what point will Israel finally say the gloves are off and they are going to be targeted?
I don't think Israel is going to go after Hamas leaders in Qatar, Istanbul, Turkey, or Kuala Lumpur. They are in Malaysia too. I don't think so. I think that people understand that there is almost a disconnect between the outside leadership and those who remain in Gaza, and it's different lot in the West Bank. So they don't count for that much. And they are divided. And they are fighting one another. And they all depended on Qatari hospitality or Turkish hospitality. It's not a priority. I think the decision where Hamas goes will be taken in Gaza and will be taken by, I mentioned his name before, him and his people who were initially opposed for years to the Sinwar alliance with Iran and the whole idea of the October 7th attack. They will go for them.
Gosh, so many questions. Brilliant, informative analysis. Thank you. A question about the Saudis. The role of the Saudis now, in particular with Americans, is very encouraging and very overdue. Can you comment further on their role?
Yes, the Saudis have decided to play. For years, they kept away of the Palestinian arena, didn't give them any money, didn't want to be involved, nothing. Not even UNRWA. And they get involved very deeply, as I mentioned before, in Lebanon, now in Syria. They are in play. I think the Saudis would very much like to get into normalization with Israel. But in order to get there, you need, to have a Palestinian address which is credible. So the Saudis are applying pressure on Mr. Abbas. Please appoint a deputy. Please reform the system, etc. And he is dragging his feet. And the second thing is that unfortunately our prime minister, in spite of his mastery of the English language, managed to offend the Saudis on Fox television by saying, concerning the Trump relocation idea of the Gazans and the Riviera in Gaza, etc., he managed to say it was a slip of tongue, but he never corrected it. He said, Saudi Arabia has huge, vast spaces maybe there. And the Saudis took, rightly so, offense. And since then, we're talking about a month now, 3 weeks, there is a campaign by the Saudi media, the pan-Arab television networks, all the outlets, the newspapers, against Bibi personally. This is not the atmosphere in which MBS, the Crown Prince, will shake his head. But I think it may very well come later. They've been talking for years, the Saudis, to us, to the point that at one juncture, just as an anecdote, they asked whether Israel could provide gas to their new mega city in Neom, you know, the futuristic city, because they realized they cannot generate enough green energy to provide for the city. So can you imagine Israel providing Saudi Arabia with some oil?
Is there somebody that could take over from Netanyahu?
Well, the opposition leadership is pale, largely ineffective, all of them. They don't attract the public. The public, I mean those who are against Bibi. But they are not drawn to somebody like we have Lapid or Gantz or ex-prime ministers, etc. It's a big question mark. We don't have elections, if things keep as they are, before October 26. The polls are saying Bibi will lose. We lose handily. But I think that the way would be, and they are discussing it, is to establish a wide front of opposition parties, an alliance of opposition parties, which will run in combination against him. And they will have to decide who's leading it. If you ask for my opinion, I do not admire this guy, and I know his faults. The best prime minister that Israel can produce now is somebody called Mr. Lieberman.
Thank you for the very insightful talk. My question, you mentioned several times Qatar and them having their finger in most pies. What is the policy, both Israel's and the US, to the extent that one exists, to minimize or eradicate their negative influence in the region?
Qatar is the host and pays for the biggest American base abroad, Al Udeid. So the Americans are very careful with the Qataris. Some of the people, I'll be careful, who work for the new administration in the region have previous connection to Qatar. Israel, it's a major issue now, because in 2018, the Prime Minister, Bibi, instructed the intelligence agencies to allow the Qataris to transfer suitcases with millions of dollars to Gaza, explaining that if you keep the economy in Gaza going and Hamas happy, there is no threat, they are deterred, she'll be fine, mate. It turned out the money went to the tunnels. So this is a big issue. It's getting complicated because three, at least, of the people who run what we call the poison machine for Bibi, the poison machine against his opponents. You have to remember, we have a prime minister who has a television network employed by him, Channel 14, which was inciting against the army and the commanders of the army throughout the war. Never happened before. Anywhere, I think. Now these guys who ran what we call the poison machine, all the social media bots and everything, these guys, turns out, I'm not a judge, it's still to be it is under investigation by the General Security Service, whose boss he wants to sack. Guess why? Because they were getting, as they were serving at the Prime Minister office, they were moonlighting for Qatar, PR in the West, mainly America, and they were getting nice sums of money in return. So Qatar now is a very explosive issue in Israel. It's a time bomb. And part of the way Bibi is reacting and operating now, I believe, stems from the fact that it's becoming very, how to put it, embarrassing for him.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Do you think there's any truth in the assertion that the government of Israel and the senior IDF leaders deliberately chose to ignore the warning signs that were being sent up to them by the female soldiers that they'd sent down to the Gaza border, who reported up about the set up camp and the practicing on attacking a kibbutz and so on, as an excuse because they wanted the excuse to invade Gaza?
No, it was sheer arrogance and I've said it before, I call them the peacock generals. When you appoint the wrong people to the job of, for example, Director of Military Intelligence, he's a swaggering paratrooper general. What does he know about intelligence? And others. And a prime minister who is convinced and sends money to Hamas that Hamas is deterred, just keep them happy. So the whole, we call it in Hebrew, conception. The whole concept was Hamas has nothing to win if they go for hostilities. They are deterred. What can they do? They didn't believe they are able to do what they did, so they dismissed it. They had all the information necessary was there. Now we come to the last night, October 6th, between October 6th and the morning of October 7th. And they take the stupid decision not to deploy, not to call in alert, not to tell the soldiers at the front line to what we call alert at dawn, nothing. Why? Because they didn't want to trigger a Hamas response. I will tell you something. In the morning of the 7th, the guy who commanded the operation was Mohammed Deif. Mohammed Deif, the chief military commander, legendary of Hamas, no longer with us. Mohammed Deif wakes up in the morning and he sees there is no Israeli army along the 65-kilometer border of Gaza with Israel. He thinks it's a trap. He delays the attack by half an hour. He couldn't believe what he saw. It was a combination of arrogance and misreading of the facts on the ground.
Just so that we give our Zoom people the feeling that we're with them, Dmitry Burshdin put this question on the email before we even started. The whole last year, the penetration of Islamists, Muslim Brotherhood or whatever into Western nations' institutions has turned a lot of global leadership against Israel. And the question is, how can Israel rebuild its narrative?
We are very bad at selling our narrative or our point of view. My wife, Ozzy, she says Israelis are interested only in talking or debating with one another and not talking to people outside, which is very true. So they didn't do anything. We have been watching the Qataris by friends and influence in the American Academy, universities, think tanks, media, etc., etc., etc. No outcry. Nothing was done. There was an intention to dismiss Qatar as a minor player, which is wrong because they have a lot of money. And now it's part of the political domestic discussion in Israel, so there is no policy on Qatar or the Muslim Brotherhood. Basically, the Muslim Brotherhood, largely financed by the Qataris, they are split between a branch which is headquartered in Turkey and a branch which has its headquarters in London, but they have lost a lot of ground. And what happened to Hamas doesn't add to their prestige and popularity.
We're going to have to leave it there. We've actually now come to our end. So, but we have, and thank you so much, because we've had the most extraordinary 45, 50 minutes that's painted us a picture of that complicated puzzle that is the Middle East by one of the world's leading experts who's been looking at it and living it and writing about it for many years. We thank you so much, and we're so grateful that you came to the Sydney Institute tonight. Thank you very much.